I'm going to make a post about Canadian literary culture and the state of Canadian publishing at the moment. And it's in response to a couple of remarks, a couple of posts and comments that I saw by Quaim Scott F., who's the ex-publisher of Dundurn Press and is current publisher of Tale Magazine, and Bev Dorio, who's publisher emeritus of the Mercury Press and an accomplished poet. Now, the post that sort of got an initial response from both Quaim and Bev was about Canadian publishing and its search for an audience. As people who follow the industry know, approximately 5% of all the books bought in Canada are published by Canadian-owned presses. That means 95% are published by multinationals, and those multinationals include lists of Canadian authors, best-selling Canadian authors, romance authors, people like Jordan Peterson and so forth. And they also include non-Canadian writers. So as anybody who has spent a lot of time in bookstores, for example, in Ottawa or Toronto, two cities where I lived for a very long time, the shelves are completely filled with American and British writers, much more than Canadian writers. In fact, the situation, ironically, somewhat surprisingly, has improved since when I was a teenager during the 1970s. I used to go to a lot of bookstores, a lot of American, a lot of British content at that time. The amount of Canadian content on shelves has increased, but the proportion, the percentage of sales of Canadian titles has decreased. A bit of a paradox there. In any case, Quaim is arguing for a nationalization, basically, of Canadian publishing. And what Bev is underlining, I mean, she's not, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but what I think she's getting at is that the key problem has been identified now for decades, and it was identified by the Massey Commission, which took place in the late 1940s and early 1950s. This is post-World War II Canada, when Canadians, many of whom had fought very valiantly in World War II, returned to a nation that they wanted to make into a genuinely sovereign nation. And at that time, American and British publishing really dominated. And what the Massey Commission concluded was that subsidies had to start going into the arts and toward writers in order to support specifically Canadian writing. And during the 1960s, that support for writers expanded to support for publishing houses. A lot of publishing houses, for example, Dundurn, Anansi, ECW, and so forth, got their start around that period. Now, in terms of Quaim's argument that we should not be providing subsidies to private companies, i.e., the book publishers that exist now, I think that's definitely a topic that we need to discuss in detail. And in terms of Bev's point that American domination, the American domination that existed in the 1950s, still exists 7 decades later, and we need to talk about that too. I suspect that what Bev is, or the direction that she's going in, is that because the domination of Canadian bookshelves by Anglophone Canadian bookshelves by American book titles is still so prevalent. We need to continue with the subsidy programs we have and sort of beef them up more. Bev has also underlined sort of interesting programs that are done in Quebec. Quebec has a much more healthy market share in terms of its Quebecois owned publishing houses. And Bev wants to learn from the Quebecois example and the Quebecois initiatives, which I think is a great idea. In any case, they are both sort of moving in the direction of increasing Canadian cultural sovereignty, which is a good direction to go in. So then the issue becomes what should we do now collectively? Obviously, something needs to change. Ken White, who has a newsletter called Shush, commented a while ago that the percentage of Canadian sales per the total is quote unquote pathetic and quote unquote something needs to change. I think that's definitely the case. More establishment type publishers like Patrick Crean have argued that we need to subsidize publishing houses, but narrow the number down to, say, half a dozen or so. There are all these different options that get discussed. Quaime and Bev both have argued that we need more sort of grassroots cultural production of literature, more community readings, more groupings, and so forth. Personally, I think that the current model is definitely in need for a major reworking. Uh, Money doesn't go to subsidize Canadian publishing in total. It goes to subsidize a sort of select group of legacy publishing houses who have received grants for many decades in a lot of cases and have come to view those grants as a kind of birthright. That leaves out newer publishers. It excludes other more innovative new media forms of producing literary culture, and I think that is wrong. That's just sort of a group, a rather entitled group, protecting its privilege. So there's a lot to discuss here, and I hope the discussion does happen. One final point that I'd like to make about these kinds of discussions is they tend to be more aggressive and vital down in the United States compared to Canada. I mean, it does happen in Canada. But America already has the hegemonic literary culture. It's interesting that despite the fact that they are doing well commercially, quote unquote well, that's not the way they themselves experience it in many cases. But despite that, they are more assertive and more bold in the way they express themselves. I think Canadians could learn a little bit from that too. The Canadian scene is a little bit too timid and it's a little bit too backbiting at the moment. People tend to get punished for speaking their own minds, and that's a shortcoming of the Canadian national character. So I hope there is a discussion, and I hope that Bev, Quaime, and others continue to work toward developing a better model and more interesting and more genuinely diverse literary culture than what we have right now.